Oh, we will now shift to highlight some of the ongoing documentation and research efforts of at the Institute for Palestine Studies, USA. Over the past year, over the past 2 years, actually, our team has been working on new tools, platforms, and editorial projects that aim to document, preserve, and make sense of the realities unfolding in Palestine in general and in Gaza in particular. From the destruction of Gaza's healthcare system to the erasure of the West Bank, the assault on Jerusalem, to the everyday workings of the Israeli system and regime of settler colonialism. Presenting this work today are three members of our IPS team. We have Leif Malhis, who is a researcher with our healthcare destruction database. He is currently a graduate student at the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies here at Georgetown, and a proud Nabulsi. We also have my dear colleague, Caitlin Cook, who leads the Palestine Square Editorial Committee. She holds a master's degree in anthropology from George Washington University and previously worked at the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, focusing on indigenous cultural heritage and language revitalization. And we have Layla Al-Qaddoumi, who's an editorial associate working on both the Palestine Square blog and IPS's research monitors, including our monitor on Israeli apartheid policies and the forthcoming Jerusalem database. Layla holds a master's degree in comparative literature from Columbia University. And we were also supposed to be joined by our dear colleague, Marie-Adèle Grosso, who's an intern with IPS in Washington, D.C., and an undergraduate at Barnard College, where she studies sociology and human rights. But Marie-Adèle had an engagement and couldn't be with us today. But we're really grateful for all of her work in making today possible. So please join me in welcoming my colleagues, and the floor is all there.
Everybody, thank you all for coming back after lunch. So I guess I'll just start out. So Dad did a great introduction to what IPS is. At the DC office, we focus mainly on the English language content, and our work here is twofold. So we're responding to the ongoing genocide in Gaza, as well as continuing and expanding on our regular projects and publishing, including the academic journals, books, etc. With that, I'll hand it over to Layla to go over things for the blog and our newsletter.
So as we all know, there's been a blackout of international media and lack of attention from legacy and mainstream Western media in Gaza, especially in the past 2 years. Despite this, Palestinian writers, journalists, storytellers have continued to report on and to convey the devastating reality of the genocide and the brutal conditions across Palestine. Since 2015, IPS's blog Palestine Square has worked to amplify these voices, reporting on a range of subjects related to Palestine, from our Letters from Gaza series to policy analysis to arts and culture reporting across the globe, both in Arabic and English and in French as well. We try to prioritize translations by at the English blog. We try to prioritize translations by Arabic speakers in Gaza. And elevate the voices of Palestinian writers who are more than capable of documenting their own reality in their own words.
So we have several databases and digital projects. Some of them are bilingual, some are English only, some are Arabic only. Our bilingual databases and projects include the Interactive Encyclopedia on the Palestine Question. This is an immense documentation effort that if you have a question, they probably have an answer to. We also have the Monitor of Israeli Imperialism and the Policies of Apartheid. And another database is the documenting of the targeting and destruction of the Gaza Strip. Leif will go into as much detail as you want on that. our English language only databases include our archive of our Congressional Monitor, which is about policies through the United States Congress. We also have the archive of the Settlement Monitor, and then the ongoing Palestine Chronology, which updates daily with all of the UN reports. It includes Hebrew language reporting on what's happening on the ground in Gaza and in the West Bank. And then we also have several Arabic language only databases and digital projects. So we have the chronology, as well as archives of the Al-Quds newspaper. We have translations of selections from the Hebrew Press, and then the Palestine Social History Archives.
Okay, so I will speak about the healthcare repression database, and I am a bit passionate about this, so I might, show a sense of like urgency, because this database was born at an urgent moment. And so there's a genesis to it. And so since October 7th, Israel's systemic assault on Gaza's health sector revealed a deliberate strategy, and it is to erase Palestinians by making Gaza uninhabitable. And so by October 9th, 2 days in, Beit Hanun hospital was bombed, and it was the first of many direct attacks on medical facilities. Within a week, 22 hospitals in northern Gaza received evacuation orders. Staff refused, as we've seen throughout the genocide, where doctors and nurses and ambulance drivers refuse as the way to resist Israeli genocide. They cited their ethical and national duty to remain. And so from that moment, the logic was clear that the destruction of health was not collateral, but rather a strategy that we've seen escalate to a level of complete destruction and annihilation of several hospitals. And so we, in our introduction on our database, you see the war biosphere, which was, a term that Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta, when he served in Gaza during the first few weeks, he saw that there's an ecosystem of death where violence reconfigures health, environment, and life itself. And so, that might seem abstract, but in reality, when you are, it's not just the hospital that's the site of this destruction, but rather the way that the ecosystem is also manipulated to create the diseases that Palestinians are unable to get treated in the hospitals. And so there was this entire system and a biosphere. So where Gaza became like a death world, where you had water and sewage systems completely destroyed. And within that first few weeks, you saw 340 doctors and nurses killed. And it was a quick transition from a direct target on Beit Hanun to 340 doctors massacred. You had antibiotic resistance bacteria emerging from heavy metal laden munitions. And so that's the biosphere in itself. This biosphere will persist for decades unless dismantling through reconstruction rooted in liberation. And so we don't just diagnose. Throughout our entire policy papers and everything that we write, we're not just diagnosing. We're not interested in that. We're trying to really anchor what we do in liberation. This is the problem. Here's the antidote. And the antidote isn't just bandaging up these Palestinians. It's getting rid of the occupation itself and centering our strategy in liberation, full stop. And so the healthcare destruction database situates its work within that framing. We document health destruction, and we also talk about the political phenomena that's going on. This isn't just a hospital was targeted because of an Israeli strike. A hospital was targeted because Israel is trying to eliminate Palestinians, the institutions that make them live. And so there was a logic behind the platform. We recognized the urgent need, and so we saw that there was a lot of propaganda framing. Al Ahli Hospital was a shell shock, and the way that it was reported, you had immediately Israeli propagandists just saying it was Islamic Jihad, it was Hamas, and that in itself is a strategy of elimination. It's creating the conditions where people don't know what's going on, who to trust. Where you had every time after then, it was considered the Hamas Gaza Health Ministry, not the regular Gaza Health Ministry. That's the narrative that we try to rebel in our narration as well and in our documentation. And so, yeah, there's a lot to why it exists. Everyone has a personal reason for why they, why they partake in this work. But for me, it was to rebel against that propaganda. And so there's a structure to the database. We have policy papers and analysis work that's scholarly and has legal interpretations of the genocide's health dimensions. We have a public records archive with over 1,000 verified documents of the WHO, UNRWA, the ICRC, and multiple Palestinian institutions and local hospitals. Within that policy, within that same tab, that when you log on, you will see testimonies where we are actually interviewing Palestinian doctors in Arabic and putting it out there as a way for themselves to narrate. There's also the glossary and the thematic index that we're still working on. And as well, there is the interview that I'm so passionate about the interview, because we have turned doctors and nurses, medical practitioners into not just, people that are giving testimony, but people that are actually analyzing and, responding to the fact that they're political now. Israel has made us a political actor, and we need to respond in a political fashion, in an unabashed fashion. Yeah, and so within that glossary, we're working on the medicide, reciprocity, war biology, and as well integrating a sort of historic process, a dehealthification process, where it isn't just the direct attacks on hospitals after October 7th. It's in 2021, it's in 2014, and as well, there's a slow element to this. It doesn't just start when the bullets are in the air for Israel. It's actually much more slower, where there's a permit regime installed, and yeah. And so our policy papers and the analysis, as I talked about, we have a few here that I've picked. There's a lot. I highly recommend that you go check them out. But the ones that we picked are the Medicide in Gaza international law, which calls for the criminalizing, that there is a need to criminalize hospital bombings. It does a very good job at showing you that there is a way that the international legal system has allowed for Israel and belligerent states to weaponize health by using the human shield narrative. And so in this policy paper, our two scholars, Niamh Gordon and Nicola Ferrighi, what they do is they show that there's a structure at play here that allows this sort of process, and that if we don't address it, it's not just an Israeli playbook. It's going to be a playbook for all belligerent occupying settler colonial states that are to come. And so another one is on amputations, which situates mass maiming within the necropolitics of control. And within that, we actually show that maiming isn't something unique to the genocide. Maiming is something that happened in Gaza, most prominently during the protests in 2018, the March of Return. And so again, we're trying to show that there's a historic process and trying to rebel against this idea that even within our own circle, that October 7th is the worst of the worst, but none of the tactics that were used were overtly new. It's just a massive influx of these tactics at a chaotic scale. There's a methodology that we've been able to show within these policy papers. The other one of my favorite, is the hospital, which Rima Zaqqout here talks about the incarceration of the Gazan body and frames hospitals as a collective embodiment of Palestinian life. This one is my favorite because it also shows that this isn't just a building where people come and receive treatment. It's also a building that sustains life and keeps communities together. So in Palestine, at least in Gaza, doctors occupy a position of respect and through that power. And so the hospital itself manifests through that. It becomes also not just a place where people are going to get bandaged, a place where people seek shelter during times of crisis, where they send their kids if they know that their home is not safe. If they know the one place where they have been able to nurture their kids is no longer safe, they turn to the hospital. And so within that policy paper and some more of an analysis, it draws up the importance of the hospitals for Palestinians. Starvation by Colonial Design by Nandine Bahour. This was published during the time when the entire world decided to say, yes, it's a starvation. In reality, here Nadine shows that it's much more. Again, there's a process to it. October 7th is actually when, the first weeks of after October 7th is actually when you start to see this deliberate starvation and weaponization of food. Another one is Repression in Gaza by Hala Shaman. And she here shows how reproductive violence has gendered a strategy of extermination for Palestinian mothers and the children. Another one is War Biology and Antimicrobial Resistance by Dr. Omar Dawashi, and he studies the microbial evolution under war toxicity. Another one is mass graves in Gaza by Mona Haddad, where she documents this, what we saw, these mass graves, and the way that even after Palestinians were creating mass graves, the Israelis would come back and just take out the bodies again as a way to punish, as a way to psychologically punish Palestinians who try to at least, find solace in the fact that they've been able to collect the limbs of their children, of the limbs of their families, and bury them. No, there's a deliberate way of trying to punish again. So even the dead don't get to rest. And then the public record section, I talked about it. It's organized, it's CMIzed. If you need to go on it, I highly recommend. It's a great tool for people that are looking for primary sources and statements and press releases. And then voices from the front. And I said that this was my favorite because I've been able to sort of see that this avenue of interviewing doctors is not just, getting rid of this idea that we're Palestinians and their allies are just like, giving testimonies. No, they're in control of the narrative and they're going to tell you how to analyze it because they've lived through that experience. They've lived through the genocide. They were there during the genocide. And so international doctors and Palestinian doctors have been, they have reimagined not just clinicians, but also as respondents and as political subjects, documenting, interpreting, and resisting the destruction of healthcare. So we have here a quote by one of the doctors who was on a mission, where he says, "We are not neutral. We treat under siege. We speak because silence kills." We collect firsthand evidence and go from there. And so the purpose of the interviews, I said, record firsthand evidence of Israel's systemic targeting, translate medical experience into political language that exposes the structure of dehealthification here for myself, and showing that there's a historical process at play here. We elevate clinicians as authoritative narratives and strategists for Palestinian survivals, and also build a living archive for policy, legal accountability, and historical record. And so the themes that we've been able to emerge from the field is the refusal by staff. They defied the evacuation orders. They treated the patients amid bombardment. There's a method. Doctors describe a repeatable choreography of propaganda, siege, strike, erasure. The collapse, as we've all seen, where like facilities literally turn into morgues, and medicine and paper, they just run out, and it's just a whole cycle of like trying to operate under siege. And there's a continuity where the doctors just felt like we're putting band-aids on these people, and then we're letting them go out again. And also within that, we're showing that it isn't just the geography of Gaza, that during the 1982 attacks on Beirut, Israel, it demonstrated plainly its deliberate attack of Palestinian institutions and Lebanese institutions during 1982. It was so horrific in 1982 that the New York Times, I was looking at the archives, the New York Times was plainly calling what was going on. We're trying to show that it isn't just the geography of Gaza, but rather the amplification and the war biosphere, the biosphere of genocide is actually much, it extends in different parts of Palestine and where Palestinians exist. And so here again, from witness to political actors, they name the crime, they defy the system, and they call for an antidote. And every single one has said the antidote is ridding the settler colonial system. That's it. They didn't even want to engage in trying to talk about what medicine to use. No, it was just, you need to get rid of the system at play here that allows for this to happen. And another one, the political, And so I think we want in this database, we talk about how health is freedom. Like you can't have health without freedom. I think that's one of the databases, and we mentioned at the beginning that there's other databases. We're working on the Jerusalem database, which will track Israel's settler colonial encroachment on Jerusalem itself and the surrounding area after October 7th. Talking about different things. It is not just health and destruction of institutions, but also the way that Palestinians are systemically and slowly being erased in Jerusalem itself.
Leif and Leila, since the next panel will start at 2 p.m., we have time to reflect on the